It has been described as an oasis of wilderness, a mosaic of ancient heathlands, of acidic grasslands, of dense woodlands and wetlands, all surrounded by a vast array of flora and fauna, more than 96 species of birds and 30 species of butterflies, which I believe is more than half of all of those known to exist in this country. And yet this oasis is not in some remote corner of the world. It's right here in the heart of a dense urban environment of 10 million people. And yet the physical characteristics of Wimbledon and Putney Commons that make it so unique are only one of the attributes. The commons are almost alone in this country and still being patrolled by mounted keepers and tended by those who live on the land, for whom it's not just a place of work, but a home.
Because it's surrounded by houses and heavily populated on the outside, you can drive down the road, certainly not realise it here, and then you turn off Parkside and the whole lot just opens up to you.
You hear them, you don't see too many badgers,
Nocturnal,
but you can see what they've done. They do an awful lot of digging, Foxes, obviously the normal urban fox, its natural prey is the black bin bag, but up here they've got to catch the rabbits.
They've got the nice restaurants.
Not so good.
This year marks 150 years since the act that created the Commons received royal assent, and in recognition of this landmark, as well as the receipt of a national lottery grant that will protect the Commons for the future generations, we are here to showcase a number of aspects of the Commons that make them so unique. And my colleague Steve will now talk a little bit more about this.
I'm Chief Executive of Wimbledon and Putney Commons, so I oversee really all of the operations day to day and liaison with the Board of Trustees who govern the Commons as well. I love the fact that you've got the combination of an important wildlife site, it's a site of special scientific interest and a special area of conservation, coupled with what is a really important community resource. It is in effect a piece of countryside within an otherwise urban area. I mean, we're only 20 minutes away from Waterloo Station here. There are a number of key drivers for the master plan. As a charity with limited budgets, it's not always been easy for us to make the investment necessary over the years in the infrastructure of the Commons. And as a result, we find ourselves in a position where wildlife habitats that need investment, we've got buildings, paths, other facilities that either need repair or complete replacement. And so what we wanted to do really with the master plan was draw together all of the work that needed doing in one document, draw together all of the costs that were going to be involved, and equally importantly, identify how we were going to secure the income to do all of this necessary work. We'd really like to thank the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the National Lottery Players, because it's them that have made this possible through the funding that's been provided for the work. The Film Festival is a series of short films aimed at introducing the Commons to people, and the management of the Commons, and also all of the variety of activities that take place.
I've been a resident of Wimbledon for over 20 years, and I live very, very close to the Common. And so particularly during the last year, during lockdown, I've spent a lot of time walking and cycling and just enjoying everything that the Common's got to offer. I qualified as a City of Westminster tour guide, but it just coincided with really the lockdown coming into effect. So I wasn't able to do any walking tours of Westminster. So what I did was I started looking at local tours, and because of the inability of people to get out, we did them virtual. Over the last few months, we've run several sessions for the Friends of Wimbledon Common, for the Golf Club, and for other groups that have really enjoyed learning about the attraction, which is right on the doorstep. It's the stories of George III, who was a regular visitor to the Common. It's the stories about Queen Victoria. One of the ponds, Queensmere, is named in recognition of her jubilee. And then the stories about the duels that occurred on the Common. We enjoy the Common for the flora and the fauna, but we don't realise that there's a long history of significant events, interesting people, and lots of interesting houses which are adjoining the Common. This is the 150th anniversary of the Act. We really have to go back to talk about the Spencer family. And this is the Spencer family that we know from Diana's ancestors. The 5th Earl Spencer had plans to enclose the Common and sell off part of the land to fund building a new manor house. These plans were really vehemently opposed by the local residents. Henry Peake was the local Surrey MP. He was a resident of Parkside. He basically opposed Spencer's plans. After 5 years of litigation, It was resolved with an Act of Parliament, and the Act of Parliament established that a team of conservators would be responsible for maintaining the common available to the public in its natural form. And it's the conservators that have performed that role for 150 years. That's the real origin of the common and why we're able to enjoy it in the form that we do today.
My title is Conservation Engagement Officer, so basically that involves me overseeing the various work that's carried out in the habitats, so the woodlands, the heathlands, around the ponds, the Beverley Brook, acid grassland, you name it. And the engagement side is really involved with the volunteers, walks and talks, and really kind of being part of the team who put out the information, let people know what we're doing. On Wimbledon Common we've got 20 hectares of heathland. It's about 50 acres. It's about a third of what's left in the entire area of London. A big part of this job, because we haven't got grazing up here, is literally getting stuck in. You'll see the volunteers in a minute down there with the loppers and the swords, and just literally cutting the scrub out to keep this habitat open. As legend goes, I was born up here, but I wasn't, because that started to make me appear like Mowgli. I was actually born in a hospital nearby, and from day number 2 I ended up on the common. My dad worked here for 37 years. So when he left the army, he came in, worked as a mounted keeper, he was senior keeper, and worked on through. There's not one thing that I feel solely great about, if you like, because, as I said with the heathland, it's ongoing. The woodlands, there's just so much more to do. I don't think you get to a point in this kind of work where your work's complete. You know, I'll prepare it, then the next person who comes along, they'll have their work cut out. It's continuous. Last year, the Common provided this opportunity for people to come out and maybe just forget about everyday problems for a minute. Just take some fresh air, go for a run, or just sit down. So when you're responsible for wildlife and nature, the more people, the effects are always going to be a double-edged sword. But this here place is for people to enjoy as much as anything. What I love about the Commons, the fact is that it doesn't really feel like work.
I live in Wimbledon and I've known the windmill for a long time, walks on the common and so on. And I was in touch with the people who were trustees before me, and that's how I got drawn in. I love its historic nature. It's a real piece of history, architectural history, and the fact that it has so much style and character, which is part of the original building. The construction was started in 1816 when Charles March, who was a carpenter, was given a grant of a piece of land to build the mill on the proviso that he made the mill available to local people for bringing their grain and getting it ground. The upper stone is moving, but the lower stone remains stationary, and it's the grinding action between the two stones which produces the flour. So it was 1816 it was started, and 1817 that it came into use as a mill. And it continued as a mill until 1864. The miller would bring the grain in a sack on his shoulder and empty it into this hopper. And with the weight of the grain, this string would go down. And as the grain got used, the bell would ring, so he would know when to come and refill it. Mills were all over the country. It was the only way of making flour. When this particular mill was built, it was built on a piece of land which was quite high, and there were hardly any trees around, so it would catch the wind. There was a lot of wind to catch. Very different to what we see now, with lots of trees growing up and buildings all around us. The rewarding part is seeing visitors coming in, seeing a wonderful building which is carrying on, being used in a way which is creative, educational as well, and playing a part in preserving a really important piece of Wimbledon history.
I manage the sports facilities down at the RMPF. We take the bookings, help out, prepare the grounds, get everybody in the right place at the right time. Generally, just do whatever is needed to make sure that people that use the facilities here have a good time. Well, we have football, rugby, we have running of various guises, from Thames Hare and Hound Running Club to different companies that come in, like run through and have events here. We have cricket in the summer, as you can see the cricket facilities here. The children come and obviously do athletics with the long jump. We have rounders at times of year. In the past we've had Aussie rules. There's 2 golf clubs that play top end of the common, and they're maintained by 2 different ground staff teams. Yeah, the weather plays a big factor in the role. What is a game plan one day can soon change. We've worked in some very difficult circumstances under the sevens. One year we had snow on the Sunday, 7:30 when we rolled up Sunday morning. Both sites were white over, and we managed to get the game started on time. So that was a massive achievement. Sam Haman, yes, I had an interesting conversation with him. He was just walking on the common with his family, and passed the time of day with him, and we stood and had a chat for about half an hour. Very interesting man, and I say he was the former chairman of AFC Wimbledon. The size of the area, it's over 1,100 acres throughout the common. It's a massive site. It meets a need for people that live in the flats and surrounding areas where they don't have the open space to get out and take fresh air. Yeah, it's a sense of achievement when people come here, and then especially when they come and give you some good feedback, it makes the job worthwhile.
I live down the road actually from here. We're about 10 minutes from the common. Coming quite often with our son, who's grown up running around here, taking his first steps here. It's a place that's very close to our heart. It's been really quite a lifeline to be able to be here in the common during COVID, with all the spaces, or many of the spaces that we often go to that we enjoy being closed. When every day other things were changing, the ways that we were living were changing on a daily basis, hour by hour. And not without difficulty, knowing that the commons were here, and the kind of stability and continuity it offered was quite a boon. MRG Studio is a landscape architecture practice, and we look at landscape at all scales, and our work is influenced by the urban planning and the planning scale, and all the way down to the detail. So we've been looking at what comprised the commons ecologically in the various pieces when it was first brought together, and in the early years and decades when the various parcels were consolidated, and understanding the habitats that were there, and understanding that actually in the 1800s the landscape was vast and it was open and it was heathy, and it continues to be heathy, but that heathiness needs looking after. Because left to its own devices, there are successional processes, which really means that the woodlands start to grow back in on the heathland. It's not simply preservation or conservation in a traditional sense. We're not looking to fix a particular kind of picture of a landscape and keep it from evolving. And we're also not trying to simply rewind time. What we're trying to do is find the ways of managing the landscape that is holistic, that is about creating the conditions for biodiversity. It is, I think, about that touch of the wild. There are different kinds of open spaces that we have across the city, near the city and outside the city. Parks and gardens are lovely, they're not the same.
I'm Oliver Bennett, and I'm the conservator appointed by the Secretary of State for the Environment. My role is to help the other conservators to protect the commons and the environment here. Wimbledon and Putney Commons is the largest remaining heathland in Greater London. Around 85% of UK heathlands have been lost over the past 150 years, and over 90% of unimproved grasslands have also been lost as a result of kind of changes in land management and development. On a per area basis, that actually makes those habitats rarer than rainforests now. With such a massive loss of those habitats, the rare plants and animals that rely on those areas to live have also been dying out. One key issue that the Commons is going to be facing in the future is climate change. We're here down at Farm Bog at the moment, which is an interesting site, and it has links with climate change. The site itself has been here for about 6,000 years, and that's 1,000 years longer than Stonehenge. It's kind of made up of these special mosses that suck carbon out of the atmosphere and store it underground, and it's so unique. The environment here, it actually is a little kind of life raft for some really rare plants that live on the site. If it did get lost, that 2 meters worth of peat would start to degrade, and the carbon that it stores would go back into the atmosphere. However, the conservators are planning an ambitious programme of work to protect and enhance the site to help reverse and address the challenges that the Commons face. The master plan is helping us to establish a clear vision and to get support from the local community and enable us to get the organisation onto a sustainable financial footing to protect and enhance this site for future generations to enjoy.